Now, this Secretary of State Marco Rubio doubts that the U.S. can reach any kind of diplomacy with the Cuban government. Listen.
The things they talk about economically are cosmetic in nature. They're not real, because that's what they've gotten used to all these years. It's just buying time and waiting us out. They're not going to be able to wait us out or buy time. We're very serious. We're very focused. As I told you a moment ago, in the context of Iran, the president's preference is always a negotiated agreement that's peaceful. That's always our preference. That remains our preference with Cuba. I'm just being honest with you. You know, the likelihood of that happening, given who we're dealing with right now, is not high.
Florida Congressman Carlos Gimenez, an immigrant from communist Cuba, joins me now. So, Congressman, what kind of military action is imminent? Is this just about the capture of Raul like we did with Maduro?
It could be, and so I don't have any precise information about what we're going to be doing next. I think it's good to keep the Cubans guessing about what our next move is, but the fact that Raul Castro was indicted, that just puts another option on the table, and the president can do a Maduro-like kind of capture of a wanted individual from the Department of Justice, and so. We did that with Noriega, we did that with Maduro. We can certainly do it with Raul Castro, but, again, like the Secretary said, we want to negotiate first as much as we can. He just doubts that that's going to come to much fruition.
Well, we've tried playing a nice guy. Remember that situation in 2016 when President Obama was in power where he took a trip to Havana, actually went out to a baseball game with Raul, tried to be buddy-buddy with the guy. This is a guy, just to be clear, explain who Raul is and what he has done in terms of massacring Cubans, his own people.
Well, Raul Castro was right alongside Fidel Castro when the revolution started in 1959 or ended in 1959. And the first things that they did is they took thousands of people and they executed them in a place called the Malecón, where they would put them up in a firing squad and kill the enemies of the revolution. And so that's just one of the crimes that he has. Then Raul's part of the whole regime. So what this whole thing was about was he ordered the shoot down of two Brothers to the Rescue airplanes, light planes that were flying over international waters. And what were they doing? They were looking for Cubans that had thrown themselves into the sea to try to swim or use some kind of a life raft to get to freedom in the Straits of, through the Straits of Florida. We know hundreds, if not thousands, of Cubans died trying to make that journey. He's responsible for that too, and so he is a monster. It doesn't surprise me. It didn't surprise me that Obama was there trying to play buddy-buddy with Raul and that regime. There wasn't a dictatorial regime that Obama didn't like. Just like today, there isn't a dictatorial regime that the Democrats don't like. Even though they're supposed to be the champions of democracy, they go around the world trying to defend these communist dictators or dictators around the world and blame the United States for the woe that they're causing to their people.
But having said that, they do have a chance of winning the midterms, taking over the majority in Congress, and President Trump warned the U.S. if, in fact, that happens. Listen to this.
I think if Democrats took control of the Congress, I think that, and let's say took control of the country, I think that this country's finished. These people are sick. They suffer from Trump derangement syndrome, but really they have bad policy. They have horrible policy.
Do you agree with the president's assessment?
I do, because just what I just said, who do they defend? They defend dictatorships from around the world. They're socialists, they're communists. That's why I left Cuba, okay? And I certainly don't want that to happen here. But I'm bullish on our chances in the midterms. If we finish the war in Iran the way I think it's going to be finished, and then oil prices start to drop, the economy speeds up, and people can see the difference between a Republican governance and Democrat governance, I think that we're going to be just fine. But certain things have to fall our way, which I believe they will fall our way. I was a little bearish about 3-4 weeks ago. I'm actually more bullish now than I was 3 or 4 weeks ago.
All right. Congressman Gimenez, great to see you, sir. Have a very good Memorial Day weekend. Appreciate you coming in.
Likewise.